also like to thank Publiknama and especially Benita D and Rajata, who actually gave me this platform and encouraged me to further talk on what I want to, like the topic I really want to talk on. And so I have decided that I'll be talking on violence against women because it's not my research area. I will specifically work on identity politics, but this area, obviously gender, also happened to be something that has been very close to me. And especially talking about violence against women in Sikkim and Darjeeling Hills, and why I took up both the area. Of course, a few people did tell me that it's a very broad area to take up. Both Sikkim and Darjeeling. But being a sociologist, and I also give a lot of respect to what I actually feel and our own stories that go on to make who we are as an individual. So I've spent my life both in mostly in Darjeeling and then in Sikkim. So our stories, belongingness, and our experiences makes us do what we do. So that is why I chose this topic. Both the areas, and of course, we all know that we are just divided geographically as two states and the district Darjeeling, but of course, we are all same. And what I wanted to actually discuss today is when you look at, firstly, just talking about the Burma Committee that was formed after the Nirbhaya case, we did see that, they specifically started stressing on giving due respect, giving due respect and giving more significance to the, uh, you know, um, our right to liberty, right to autonomy, right to equality. That was the actual main agenda behind the Burma Committee. And but when you also look at the statistics, I wouldn't want to go much and deal much into statistics. Of course, I do have it, but when you actually go by statistically looking at, there are more cases that have come up after the Nirbhaya incident, and like there has all the more been an increase. So the question still comes up as to what what are we left, what did actually the changes that came up after that. And specifically when you also look at crime against women or violence against women, we specifically tend to associate it as happening somewhere in not in Sikkim and Darjeeling. We want to, or we just want to escape the belief that our society is a very gender neutral society, and most of the crime that happens is mostly happening in other parts of India, but that is not the case. So I specifically want to stress on most of the crime that are like happening in and around here. So why when you look at such kind of cases that are happening, and when you look at violence, so what I also found out is you have to actually firstly look at violence and go beyond the layman's definition of violence, and look at what are the factors that are actually perpetuating such kind of violences, and why has there been no reduction in violences so far. So firstly you have to also deconstruct the actual meaning behind violences. And when you look at the definition from the UN definition, it specifically states that violence against women are like physical, mental, and psychological violences, or emotional violences that comes. The main are physical, psychological, you call it, and the abuses that happens. So those kind of violences are there, and it might happen in public or in private spaces. So it might happen anywhere. And when you look at such violences, it happens firstly in three levels. Like when you look at the UN, how the UN and WHO has tried to classify it is how violence happens within home. Like the classic example of which is domestic violence. Domestic violence, I think, when you actually look at violence itself, most of the people tend to associate violence as happening, within the homes. And domestic violence is something that is, all the more, gained more. Everybody know. Like most of it came to, like most of the domestic violence cases that we got to see during after the lockdown and during the lockdown. But other kinds of violences that happens within, like even dowries, female genital mutilation, all that, the social structure and the customary laws that happen within the family is also something that perpetuate violence within home. And the other kind of violence is a community or general community based violences that happens. When you look at general community based violences, you can also look at how the woman's body is actually, uh, you know um, commercialized, or it is commodified, that mostly happens in the like the general community level. And women, how they do not have control over their own body for abortion, sex selective abortion, forced pregnancy. So all these aspects are also included within the general community level violence. And the other one is, I think, one of the most important, that is cultural factors and the customary laws, and the the historically ingrained notion of male domination in our society. And the state also comes to play here. I mean, like, the state is equally perpetuating such kind of violences against women. And when you also look at the recent incident, like by Mamta Banerjee, where she actually tried to falsify a rape case in 2012 by stating that violence against women is actually rising because men and women, they have a very close proximity. I mean, they have a very close relationship right now, and like you. Matlab, they don't really have the awkwardness that was there, so that is giving rise to more crime against women. So that was her what justification for falsifying the rape case. And another such instance also happened in Assam, where the National Commission for Women, which is actually supposed to protect women, went on to blame a 20-year-old woman who was who faced assault by a mob. So she was actually slut shamed, and specifically she was termed as being very quote unquote modern and quote unquote westernized, that she went to the extent of being liberal, in short. So when you when you actually see all these instances, might sound very general, but these are the actual instances that are all the more culminating, and that are all the more strengthening violence against women. So the causes, like I said, I've stressed on the customary laws, but when you look at the causes of violence against women, why is it coming up? And the first such instance, like I mentioned, is the customary law. So giving simple examples, when our society, like, we want to nullify the fact that our society is a gender neutral society, and it does not really distinguish between men and women, and which is not really true. And that is something I wanted to talk about. And when I actually was thinking about this topic, so I simply happened to ask my father about in Nepali, hamro society ma, I mean, like, what do you think about violence against women in our society? Is it there? Is it not there? Of course, I do. I mean, like, I did have my view on it, but I wanted to take his view because he's someone who knows the society in and out. I may know the society in and out, but I have not really, I mean, like, I do not really live here. I do not really see the everyday life here. So that is something I asked him. And he of course said that Hamro society, it believes in equality for women, and there is no crime against women, and let alone there is no crime against women. So I did forget at that point that he's also someone who is trying to consciously or unconsciously protect his male privilege and the male domination that is already there. So that is something that is something I could observe from there. And even when growing up in the hills of Darjeeling, from a very young age, I was made aware of my gender, and how cautiously I should guard it. I mean, how cautiously I should walk on nutshells. So that is when usually growing up also, like, I was constantly reminded and constantly made to feel aware of my gender, and made aware of trafficking, made aware of child abuse, child molestation at a very young age. And the like, I've written an article as well on how the concept of Cheli Beti, it actually binds us, in a caged scenario, and that really happens. From a very young age, um, we are made aware of what we shouldn't, and what are our like, what are our capabilities and what are not. So we actually these safety nets that we say by Rati Janu Daina Besi, and we are made to follow a certain norm, certain, so all these were actually conditioning us to accept our fate that comes with being born a woman. So all these are there. And the other important aspect that is also the cause of violence against women is economic aspect. And when you look at economic aspects. So most of the violence and economic dependency and subjugation is, it's like a vicious circle. And from when you are conditioned in that manner, where you tend to think that you are always like you are always to give yourself a secondary importance. So you condition yourself in that manner. I can actually say this because I might have been given the privilege to bring forth my interest, bring forth my man, but not all. We have been conditioned and psychologically trained in such a manner that you put your interest secondary. And when that really happens, so you tend to like always confine yourself with meniality, and that is what happens. And economic deprivation, I mean, like economically deprived, when women are economically deprived, also the violence all the more perpetuates when you are dependent on someone else for the same. So these are the factors that contribute to violence against women. And when you actually look at the global, worldwide scenario of violence against women, you can see that WHO stated that 1 in 3 women are, have faced sexual violence, intimate partner violence. And when there are around 38% of women worldwide that have actually, according to who, that have actually faced psychological traumas, lifelong traumas. So these are also there, I mean, like in the world. And when you actually look at the violence against women scenario worldwide, after the lockdown, it all the more increased. You could see that there was widespread domestic violence all around the world, be it UK, US, European countries, India, like almost everybody which we claim to be the progressive countries did have domestic violence on a wide scale. And most of the countries combated it in a very creative manner, like Spain, made the lockdown lenient for women. And Canada had a few places in Canada had also given out free cell phones. So these were the ways they were combating violence. And when you look at violence against women in India, at the National Commission for Women had reported, I think, around 1,500 cases in May alone, and which further increased in June to, I think, around 2,045, which was the highest in almost 8 months. So such cases were reported. And when you also look at the world, I mean, like violence against women at I mean, a global level, you also had seen the black and white challenge that came up, and there were a lot of crime cases that was happening in Turkey, where Pinar Gultekin was murdered, and such cases were there simultaneously, which were also happening in our own states of Sikkim and Darjeeling as well. But like the more importance was, of course, given to like whatever was highlighted there. So and when you look at crime against women and violence against women in India, um, I already stated that which violence against women all the more increased after the lockdown, and you could see a large number of domestic violence cases that were there. And India sadly also ranks. Thomas Reuters Foundation 2018 stated that India is one of the most unsafe countries, first ranked one and one of the most unsafe countries in the world for women. And when you look at Sikkim and Darjeeling, like according to the National Crime Records Bureau, Sikkim in 2016 was ranked 15th unsafe in the country. That is around 50.3 out of 100,000 persons, and Bengal was the seventh unsafe country state in the world, state in India. So when you look at such statistical data, it all the more questions that like, is it really safe? Do we really think that it is our places, our home, which we call, are actually safe for safe for women? When you look at Sikkim, and it's I think it is 47% of the population in Sikkim are women, and the recent census also states that the mortality rate of women, it is 889, and the literacy rate is relatively better. I think it's 75 per. I think men was 86. So when you look at Sikkim and the status of women in Sikkim historically as well. Uh, women were also subjugated to a lot of sexual assault during the time of Qazis as well, and they and there was a very uh, patriarchal norm at that point of time as well, where a wife having to divorce her husband had to pay a certain amount, and she could keep only the girl child and not the the boy child with her. So such norms and the inheritance right that is still there. If a girl from Sikkim marries outside from Sikkim, so a man from outside Sikkim is not entitled to the property right and all, that is also there. And when you look at the Sikkim State Commission for Women that was set up in order to protect the rights of women, it has also been seeing an steady increase in the number of um, complaints that are being received, which also shows a blue green signal to us, because it also shows that um, women are being aware of their rights. Women are not backing out from voicing their opinions for when it comes to anything, and when they think that something is wrong, they actually voice in their opinions. And when you look at Sikkim and the cases that are actually happening in Sikkim as of now, there are a lot of cases that came in. And when the recent case that happened, that was in Tikjat, where a 20-year-old girl was murdered, it all the more questions. I mean, like, she was someone who was actually who had completed her class 12 and was going to fill up forms for her college level. So that is when she was brutally stabbed by her ex-boyfriend. And this all the more also makes us question the concept of love itself, which is also very violent, and which is also very dangerous for women. And how many of us would have even looked at the movie Chapak without even having to fear at the back of our minds? And this all the more questions, like, simultaneously, where even Pinar Gultekin was actually murdered by her ex-lover, and you have the same case in Sikkim, but of course you do not get as much highlight, and you do not get as much front page or cover for such instances. The recent cases in Sikkim, you also saw a lot of cases that was coming up when it work, the violences that are related to workplace, that was also there on the rise. And when you recently saw a assistant professor in Sikkim University that was being stalked by her colleague, and she had to actually file a complaint, and to the extent that because she was stalked everywhere. And this all the more really makes us question as to how safe are we in our own state. And when you look at such scenarios, and even when you look at Darjeeling, the recent case of Ramada Hotel, where um, a worker, a lady who used to work there, she was also assaulted by one of her, co-workers, and such, and all the more she was later slut shamed as well, as to she's scripting it up all the more, and all such instances. So when you actually look at such cases, it all the more makes us question again our own safety and our own customary laws and our own, um, and our own opportunities that we are giving. How safe are we making our society for the women around us? When you also look at such instances of violence against women in the tea gardens as well, most of the workers in tea gardens are women. And when you actually look at the women in the tea gardens, they are not they are all the more prone to vulnerabilities, and they are all the more prone to violences, like trafficking. And you have instances where they obviously, when you have instances where their working conditions are not really apt for them, and maternity leaves, which had an all the more issue before, is also like few of them are snatched away from it. So there are a lot of instances that happens in the tea gardens as well. And I just read one of the articles where it was stated that most of the women that are being trafficked are also Nepalis from around mostly Duars region, and also from the hilly regions of Darjeeling. So all such instances all the more makes us question. And when you look at the cultural norms that I was questioning, like, it all goes back to the cultural and societal norms. All the more women are made aware, and uh, like, I just read one of the articles by Jean Chambel, so where he actually pointed out an interview that was happening. by a British female comedian, where she was asked like, what is the similarity between a man and a woman? So she interestingly stated that both of them actually hate women. The similarity between both sexes are they both hate women, and this all the more is very funny, and all the more it makes us question as to what what is it that the society cannot accept about women. So these are this that was one instance that I read, and women are equally the carrier of patriarchy. And from a very young age, even I was made aware of how I should walk, and I was used to be called as Dangana Pugego Keti by my own grandmother or grandmother's sister. So there were a lot of such instances where I was continuously made to feel aware of my future in-laws and how to please them, and so on. So women are also, but I wouldn't blame them, because women are just furthering the patriarchy that has been passed forward to them by the previous generations, and they are just carrying it and proceeding it forward. So so those were the things that we as Nepali women, or we in our community, we grew up hearing, and which we internalized. Of course, was exposed to the concept of gender and sexuality and equality. So because of that, of course, I could question the norms, but not everyone, because most of them, they just inculcate it, and they adhere to it, and that is how they pass on patriarchy to their future generations. So when you look at WHO and how they've been tackling violence against women, there was an interesting the ecological process by which you can actually internalize, because when you look at violence, it is also very important to look at the kinds of violence. When you want to combat violence, it's also important to look at the kind of violences that are there, and because violences differ, that is why I'm talking about violence against women in Darjeeling and Sikkim. And locally, when you look at violence against women that is happening, and when you closely monitor how and why it is happening, only then we can actually come up to the solutions about which I'll be talking a bit. And when you want to look at the solutions that are there, you have to closely look at the working NGOs, look at the Working Women's Commission, and all that is there. So the ecological process firstly tries to deconstruct the individual, as to how he or she is brought up, as to how she's nurtured in a particular manner, that she won't, he or she is. How she's socialized, in short. And when you also look at the relationships that are built around you, so that also impacts a lot as to how violence against women or violence further is continued. And the other such instance is also the state that you belong to, and the state that you belong to, how it reacts to violence against women. For example, there are many religious fundamentalist states where they would actually um, trade with the women's economy and autonomy and economic independence. So like that also really matters, the state that you actually belong to. And the other is the customary law, and how the state actually entertains the customary laws, and because state is equally a perpetuator of customary laws, right? So those are the factors that come into play when you look at the ecological factor. So when you w- so so these are the ecological factors that come into play, and one such instance I would like to cite is the recent witch hunting that was in 2019. It wasn't the first of its kind that happened in Sikkim, but definitely it was the first of its kind that was recorded, which needs to like needs to have more coverage of such a crime against women, where it was very shocking, because such instance happened in a place like Malli in South Sikkim, which is not a rural area. And the lady was 77-year-old who was trashed, physically assaulted by her own neighbors, and only because her grandson was aware of it, and he reported the media house portals, because of which it got an attention, and police were not as sensitive towards the case, towards it. So it all the more makes us question as to like these are not something that was did all just came suddenly, because these are something that has been happening and which goes underreported. And there was also a video that went viral, and it was by Kershon TV, where a woman was questioned. She was like slut shamed, and she was questioned as to you know she was in short, her entire thing, entire village actually, like tied her around a pole, and she was literally slut shamed. And that was a very disturbing video that was that was there in Facebook. But it was good that such, um, ideas are making the talks, and such discourses are coming up to discuss witch hunting and such aspect, which is not new, which is an old aspect, but that's something just erupted as of now. So when you want look at how to combat and how to deal with violence against women, of course you have judiciary, and of course you have police people, and of course you have legal authorities taking care of it. But also as a civil society, but also as simple people, what can we do in order to combat it? First and foremost, it is very important to look at it from a very local level, and because not all violences are same, and there is no such one go-to step in order to deal with violence against women. So it's very important to study the nature of violence against women that is happening locally, and then associate it with people, I mean, the concerned NGOs, and the concerned locality people. So that is something very important. And it is also very important, firstly, to raise awareness that not to take domestic violence and not to take violence against women as a taboo, because most often women are skeptical to come up and talk about it openly. So the taboo associated with it needs to be removed, and women should come up, and we should also be there to make women aware that they are not alone. um, and there should also be a lot of gender sensitive medical facilities, gender sensitive norms, gender sensitive facilities that should be medical facilities that should be made available for women constantly. So that is another aspect. And the other thing that we can also do is, which is very important and also very general, is like the way the children are socialized. That is also very important, to educate them on the basis of gender difference, and to make them more sensitive towards it. And it is also very important to firstly make them aware of the violences that are there, because most of the time you tend to, there are various levels of violences. Firstly, there is physical violence, there is mental violence, there's emotional violence, there's financial violence. So there are many kinds of violence. You also need to you know look at all of it, and not just when you are an adult, because it's very important you inculcate it in children at a very young age, so they in they nurture in it as something very natural and not something to be learned. So that is something very important to be taken care of. And when you also look at the violence against women in a global level, it is also very important to keep in mind that all such aspects that are happening can happen to any one of us. And nurturing and inculcating in us um, nurturing and inculcating in us that aspect, to understand and to unfold it further. So these are the very important aspects that you need to keep in mind. And I'll just tell you. Yeah, and so that was something I wanted to end with a very personal note, but I don't think would be very um, so so that was something I wanted to say. And the violence against women is something, you want to, I mean, like every woman thinks of it. So this is something I wanted to talk about. And um, um, I this um, so yeah, one thing I wanted to also point out is that I cannot go further but stress that it is very important, and that you firstly recognize the kind of violences, because most of the time like you do not go further than hearing them out, but you just recognize the kind of violences, and that is, I think, the only way further you can eradicate it, and and further work towards it. And as women, we should also come together. And I think the community women who are actually indulged from a community, with a community level, or women who are actually not just confined towards the home, are the women who are also vocal about it. So in order to create that safe community level solidarity, it is also important to um, build that trust, build that group, build that community amidst yourself, and be there for each other. And when you specifically, it is also very important to make connections very feasible amongst each other, because not everyone can be as vocal to talk about violence against them, to talk about the violence that they are facing. So just be there for each other, assure them that you are there for each other. So that is how um, I think you can work towards eradicating and work towards it. So that is what I wanted to talk about today. And if you have any questions, I would take it. I'm so sorry, I didn't really see the comments, and I was also very nervous. Very sorry, because this is my first live video. So I'll just take a few questions. Nepali, okay. Uh, या नेपालीमा बोल्नु पर्दैछ, but I'm sorry, मैले इङ्ग्लिसमै प्रिपेयर गरेको थिएँ, and I didn't see your comment. I'm very sorry. Customary violence, throw some light on. um, Bharat Karki, okay, throw some light on customary violence. So customary violence or customary law, I mean, uh, भाइलेन्स अब यसरी हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अब मेरो आफ्नो एक्सपिरियन्स चाहिँ भन्छु, किनभने अब जस्ट वेन वी ग्रो अप एज चिल्ड्रेन होइन, अब जब हामी वेन वी ग्रो अप एज चिल्ड्रेन, अन्त हाम्रो हाम्रोमा जुन चाहिँ इन्कल्केट हुन्छ कि यो गर्नुपर्छ, त्यो गर्नु हुँदैन होइन। अब जस्तो मलाई अब आफ्नै बोजूले भन्नुहुन्थ्यो कि तँ अब डङ्किनी चल्यो सात गाउँ हल्यो, अब लाइक ढङ्ग नपुगेको केटी, आई मिन लाइक अन्त बिरालुको चालमा हिँड्नुपर्छ, तँ एकदम खुट्टा ड्र्याग गरेर हिँड्छस्, अब त्यो सब कुराहरू इट्स भेरी जेनरल हुन्छ नि। अब यो टपिक इट्स सेल्फ इट्स नट भेरी समथिङ द्याट यु निड अ थ्योरिटिकल एस्पेक्ट टु इट, एन्ड आई वुड हेभ पुट सम functionalist perspective जसले सपोर्ट गर्छ, बट अब इट्स अ भेरी जेनरल टपिक विच निड्स टु बी डिस्कस, विच निड्स टु हेभ अ डिस्कोर्स कन्टिन्युड होइन। त अब यो खालके भाइलेन्स हामीमा, हामी सरी, यो खालके आइडिया हामीमा हालिदिएको हुन्छ सानैदेखि कि हामी चाहिँ अब हाम्रो आफ्नो एउटा दार, अब एउटा लक्ष्मण रेखा हुन्छ जुन चाहिँ हामीले पार गर्नु हुँदैन। एज वुमेन वी नो इट। हामी अहिलेसम्म पनि आई वुड हेजिटेट टु गो आउट आफ्टर एट, मान्छेले के हुन्छ के गर्छ, त्यो सब कस्टमरी भाइलेन्स हामीमा यति साह्रो, कस्टमरी आइडियाजहरू यति साह्रो हामीमा इन्कल्केट हुन्छ कि यु विल नट कम टु नो हुन्छ नि कि अब यो मेरो लागि यो गर्नुपर्ने हो, यो गर्नुपर्ने होइन, एन्ड द्याट अल द मोर कन्फाइन्स आवर एबिलिटिज, एन्ड द्याट अल द मोर कन्फाइन्स अस फ्रम बिङ द इन्डिभिजुअल वी क्यान बी होइन। अन्त त्यो सब कुराले गर्दा हामी पछि बिहे भएर कहीँ गयो भने त्यसपछि पनि वी इन्कल्केट दि आइडिया कि अब हामी चाहिँ अब वी क्यान नट we cannot go beyond the custom, we cannot go beyond what is expected of us। त्यो खालकेले चाहिँ हामी एकदमै नाइभ हुन्छ हामीलाई अब त्यसपछि त हाम्रोमा उयो हुन्छ होइन, अब हामीमा उयोहरू हुन्छ के भन्छ, अत्याचारहरू हुनु थाल्छ, किनभने कस्टमरी भाइलेन्समा त डाउरी डेथ आउँछ, कस्टमरी भाइलेन्समा फिमेल जेनिटल म्युटिलिएसन, फिमेल फिटिसाइड आउँछ, तर त्यो सब त हाम्रो सोसाइटीमा हुँदैन नि त। अन्त त्यसै कारण म त्यसको बारेमा कुरा पनि बेसी गर्दिनँ, तर हाम्रोमा चाहिँ यो खालके हालिदिन्छ सानोमै कि अफकोर्स मलाई आई वुडन्ट बी स्योर कि मतलब फिमेल आई मिन लाइक मेन आई मिन लाइक नानीहरू केटाहरू प्रेफर गर्छ बेसी, केटाहरू गर्दैन, त्यो सब त आई वुड नट बी स्योर, मेबी मेनी पिपल have also done abortion. I really don't know. I couldn't question it, but I wouldn't be really sure. I wouldn't really agree with the fact कि हाम्रो सोसाइटीमा चाहिँ women and men are equally preferred. So त्यो खालकेमा चाहिँ हामीलाई हालिदिन्छ, which all the more हामी पनि त्यो आइडिया फर्दर लान्छ कि हामी चाहिँ अब we are not as important as our male counterparts, and because of which I should put my interest secondary. I should respect my husband. So त्यो खालकेले चाहिँ violence continues. Specify the common violence against women in our society. Common violence in our society. हजुर हाम्रो कमन भाइलेन्स इन आवर सोसाइटी भेरी मच डोमेस्टिक भाइलेन्स इज देयर डोमेस्टिक भाइलेन्सको केसेसहरू निकै राइज पनि भएको छ सिक्किम क्रोनिकल्सले स्टेट पनि गरेको थियो देवर अराउन्ड 6-7 केसेस द्याट वर रिपोर्टेड अन्त अफकोर्स हाम्रो सिक्किम सोसाइटी एन्ड दार्जिलिङमा पनि प्राय रुरल एरियाजमै केटीहरू हुन्छ जुन चाहिँले गर्दा उनीहरूलाई इट्स भेरी डिफिकल्ट टु रेजिस्टर केसेस अन्त एउटा कुरा चाहिँ के प्रब्लम छ भने केटीहरूलाई एक्चुली थाहा पनि हुँदैन कि उनीहरूपट्टि भाइलेन्स हुँदैछ भनेर होइन किनभने उनीहरूपट्टि भाइलेन्स हुँदैछ भन्ने थाहा हुँदैन सो कन्डिसन्ड आई मिन म त एटलिस्ट बोल्नु सक्छु आई वुड कन्सिडर माइसेल्फ अ बिट प्रिभिलेज बिकज इभन दो ममा पनि यो खालके रीतिहरू यो खालके यो नर्म्सहरू इन्कल्केट गरेको थियो पेट्रियाकल नर्म्सहरू बट आई कुड डिस्टिङ्विस बिकज आई डिड स्टडी द्याट इन सोसियोलोजी और अब आई डिड स्टडी जेन्डर एज अ सब्जेक्ट सो त्यसै कारण मैले डिस्टिङ्विस गर्नु सकेँ कि यो गलत हो यो सही हो तर केटीहरूलाई थाहा पनि हुँदैन कि उनीहरूप्रति भाइलेन्स हुँदैछ भनेर आई वुड से मेरै बोजूलाई पनि कतिपल्ट त म्याम तामाङ ल्याङ्ग्वेजमा चाहिँ उसलाई पनि थाहा थिएन होला कि कतिवटा भाइलेन्स उसँग भयो मैले आफै देख्दै थिएँ कि मेरो बाजेले कति अत्याचार गर्नुहुन्थ्यो होइन आई नट ashamed to say it but there were a lot of but she would never mind because she knew and she knew very well like this is something that she was doing right about it and she wasn't wrong about it so and I also grew up believing that until I was exposed to subjects like gender and sexuality and how of course when you talk about sexuality pani it does not come as a choice to women and how केटीहरूको सेक्सुअलिटी or say केटीहरूको इज्जत चाहिँ लाइक विनिता दी सेट लाइक सियोको धारमा हुन्छ त्यो खालके चाहिँ हुन्छ because our honor is considered as the honor of the family. Of course, we get due respect with being a celibacy, of course, but that also comes at the cost of cutting and curtailing our freedom. So त्यो खालके भाइलेन्सेसहरू डोमेस्टिक भाइलेन्स छ एन्ड अफकोर्स टी प्लान्टेसन वर्कर्सहरूको भाइलेन्सहरू पनि ट्राफिकिङ जुन चाहिँ भेरी ऱ्याम्पेन्ट छ इन्डो नेपाल बोर्डरमा होइन नेपालीहरूको केटीहरूको प्रति त्यो सब पनि धेरै भाइलेन्सहरू हाम्रो केटीहरूको प्रति छ वर्क प्लेसको भाइलेन्स पनि धेरै छ होइन जस्तो सिक्किम युनिभर्सिटीमा भने मैले लास्ट इयर एउटा मास कम्युनिकेसन डिपार्टमेन्टमा पनि एउटा प्रोफेसरको प्रति प्रोफेसर होइन सरी प्रोफेसरले स्टुडेन्टलाई बाई सरी असल्ट गरेको थियो त्योहरू पनि छ अन्त तपाईँ अब धेरै सिक्किममा हेरौँ भने त अब यो लकडाउन नभए पनि यो भाइरसको थ्रुमा त धेरै हामीले देख्नु पायौँ केसेसहरू एकदमै डिस्टर्बिङ सिनेरियोहरू हामीले देख्नु पायौँ होइन कतिवटा केसेसहरू एउटा टिकच्याकमा थियो आज बिहान पनि मैले एउटा पाक्योङको एउटा नानी मोलेस्ट भएको देखेँ आई मिन त्यो न्युज हेरेँ त्यो सब केसेसहरू पनि धेरै देख्नु पायो योपालि एकदमै डिस्टर्बिङ हाउ लिबरल इज आवर सोसाइटी how liberal is our society towards women comparatively how liberal is our society towards women comparatively with other societies oh yeah I would say that it is I wouldn't say it's liberal but it is comparatively better than other societies I mean like other so-called society अब अरू बाहिरको अरू स्टेटहरू भन्दा चाहिँ हाम्रो when you also look at the sex ratioबाटै थाहा पाउँछौँ हामी and also like एजुकेसन लिट्रेसी लेभलबाट पनि हामीले थाहा पाउँछौँ कि हाम्रो सोसाइटीमा दे गिभ इक्वल प्रिभिलेज आई मिन हायर एजुकेसनमा त सिक्किमको केटीहरूको बेसी पर्सेन्टेज छ आई क्यानट रिकल द फिगर राइट नाउ तर उनीहरूको बेसी आई मिन लाइक बेसी मात्रामा केटीहरू हायर एजुकेसनमा गएको मैले रिपोर्ट पढेको थिएँ इट वाज अ भेरी long presentation so it's very difficult to compile everything but thankfully question नर्ममा भन्नु पाएँ कि त्यो त्यस्तो थियो and I would say it is very much I mean comparatively very much better than other society but I would not really say that it is also not a patriarchal one and it is not gender neutral which we need to work towards slowly. Yes, we are nurtured in this way, only we are never taught to say no. Shankar, we are nurtured in this way. हजुर, we are never taught to say no. I think in everyday life we also witness Nikki Bainiko, witness the role of social networking sites or media as the reproduction of symbolic. But yeah, that is a very. I mean, when you look at social media, like very current one, when you look at Riya Chakrabarti, it's like a very disturbing. I've not been following it. You can actually see the media witch hunt that is actually happening for almost 1.5 month or so on the when अब त्यो एउटा नेसनल लेभलमा भयो होइन एन्ड आफ्नो यो अब गभर्मेन्टले या पोलिटिकल पार्टीले दे क्यान गो टु वाट एक्सटेन्ट यु द्याट इज अल्सो समथिङ वे यु क्यान एसोसिएट विथ वाट आई सेड द the state level violence, that is the state that is actually encouraging violence against women मा त्यो हेर्नु सक्छौँ होइन तर सिक्किममै हेरौँ भने पनि अब आइएम नट अ जर्नल आई डोन्ट हेभ अ जर्नलिजम ब्याकग्राउन्ड बट स्टिल लेमनले पनि हेर्नु सक्छ कि वुडन्ट really point out and name any media house but अस्तिको एउटा तिर्जुकको जुन चाहिँ रेप केस रेप केस एन्ड मर्डर केस भएको थियो त्यो मर्डर केसमा पनि एन्ड इभन रेप केसेस होइन लास्ट इयर ग्यान्टकमा जुन चाहिँ एउटा जङ्गलमा एउटा केटीको भएको थियो त्यो सब केसमा पनि यु कुड सी लाइक हाउ इम्पेसेन्ट द पिपल वर टु प्रुभ कि अब एक 24 घन्टामै केस क्र्याक गरे अरे होइन ब्रेकिङ न्युज हो अब it's very insensitive on the part of media house to actually point out something that is concerning to women, their life, and something as gruesome and something as intolerable as rape हुन्छ नि as breaking news हुन्छ नि breaking news भनेर चाहिँ अब पोस्ट गरेको थियो भेरियस मिडिया पोर्टल्स एन्ड न्युज हाउसेस अर वाट एभर उनीहरूले चाहिँ पोस्ट गर्यो एन्ड when you follow up the news when I don't usually want to follow but it's very disturbing actually so the second you 24 घण्टामा केस क्र्याक भयो and that is actually the quote unquote the happening news but what about like उनीहरूको family what are they going through and why don't you also analyze the socio-economic political factor why don't you also analyze why such cases are happening in our society why is rape happening to just go beyond like journalism it shouldn't be so objective like कि यस्तो भयो breaking news and the case is solved within 24 hours and that is it and you have move on to the next case so you also need to think and you also need to question reflect as to why is it like why is it happening at such a rampant rate and why is it all the more getting more चढावा हैन अब त्यो सब कुरा पनि हेर्नु पर्छ and I think that is very important and I think that media निकी बहिनीले भनेको जस्तो media your journalism or whatever they should be a bit more sensitive towards handling cases. I wouldn't want to talk much on the national level scenario that is happening which is also very disturbing I know but I think when you look at media houses in and around here I think they should be a bit more sensitive towards how they handle such cases and try to analyze and at least hold some एउटा some discussion round or something like that to make people aware because the main agenda behind journalism and putting up news is also to make people aware as to what can be done or how can one eradicate it rather than just giving an objective news to it. How vocal are women in our society against violence compared to other society? Mandira Juko, the popular perception is that women in our part of the country are more empowered and liberal. In fact, I have had many men and women to dismiss the existence of gender discrimination and violence when I try to bring it up. Perceptions are women in our part of the country are more empowered. In many men and women to dismiss the existence of. Yeah, that is. Like I said, like I gave one of the examples by my own father who said that हाम्रो society ma there's no violence and there is no discrimination or केटा केटीमा त्यो डिफरेन्सहरू हुँदैन भनेर भन्नुभयो हैन. At the same time he was also of course he's all the time reading news on women rape cases जुन चाहिँ हुन्छ आजकल he always comes to me and he says एउटा न्युज निस्केछ he is like ए तिम्रो मटेरियल आयो तिम्रो अझै एउटा I mean that is also very insensitive on his part because I know he would not feel as I would because I'm a woman हैन So subtle level ma, when you look at it in a subconscious level ma, you can see the insensitivity that comes with such cases, and those cases, what he's also portraying indirectly is these are not cases that are rare. These are cases that happens, but at the same time he's trying to deny the fact that our society is, has violence against women, or as what is gender, and it is gender neutral. So मन्दिरज्यू जब तपाईँले भन्नुहुन्छ कि people try to have this perception, of course मैले भने कि our society is better, it's better than most of the society, at least most better than most of the places I've been to, or better than most of the actually most of the states in India, but it is not as it is not as liberal towards women, it is not as non-discriminatory towards women, because of course you do see domestic violence that's occurring, you do see there's a bit of preference when it comes of course to their sons, or त्यो खालके perception हाम्रोमा छ. And all these small उयो हुन्छ नि कुराहरू जस्तो चेलीबेटीको concept, which I found it very interesting, so I just wrote an article on it. How the concept of चेलीबेटीले पनि हामीलाई bind गर्यो कि चेलीबेटीको इज्जत or the honor of the family. So त्यो खालके notionहरू they just bind our capabilities further, and they just nurture us in a particular manner where you find yourself wanting to be subordinate to your male counterpart. So I wouldn't really say that it is a non-discriminatory society at all. Menstruation and untouchability is very common, what I experienced. Uh, Menstruation and untouchability, in when you look at few of the society, like personally I wouldn't say I've experienced much of it, and I think when you come to menstruation and untouchability, at least our society I would say is a bit liberal when you come to it. Of course there were interesting aspects, like my mother just told me recently that periodहरू हुँदा चाहिँ केटीहरूले पिकलहरू छुयो, त्यो त आई थिङ्क इट्स अ भेरी कमन थिङ. पिकल छुयो भने साँच्ची नै बिग्रिँदो रहेछ पिकल, अर ब्रिन्जल छुयो भने साँच्ची नै कुहिन्छ ब्रिन्जलहरू. And that was an idea passed on by my grandmother to my mother. So त्यो खालके concept, and she still believed in that हुन्छ नि तर but that is also something that I don't know, but it does not really have any scientific explanation to it. But when you come to menstrual untouchability practices, I don't think that, I don't think, and there isn't much of such practices in and around, but I really don't know about the rural areas. But I don't really think there is much of the practices like you have in Nepal, where a woman is actually confined to a particular room. Actually, I had done an MA dissertation on menstruation that was particularly pertaining to a particular Brahmin community, which did follow that menstrual ritual cycles and all that. But I don't think, but there isn't much of untouchability when you talk about in our society. Um, it's a common practice in school or homes just to cause physical pain to kids. Okay, I think that is more of an explanation. Why our people take a stand for cases of celebrities who took his life himself, but not for any rape victim? Why? Mm, what is stopping our people to come out of mass protest against rape culture? Mm, that's a very interesting question. Yeah. uh, what is stopping our people to come out of mass protest for rape culture? That is something. I mean, खै अब यो सेलिब्रिटी ट्यागले गर्दा होला, it's like I don't know. That is a topic I have been actually pondering upon myself. कि यस्तो craze चाहिँ किन भयो? Because nobody cared about Sushant when he was alive, and I would say I haven't. I of course we did respect him for the honor that came with being a self-made man, but hadn't really watched movies of him. अन्त त्यो खालके क्रेज चाहिँ अहिले किन भयो? Even my grandfather, he is constantly watching it and constantly, cursing Riya Chakrabarti. 2 months back, he did not even know who's Riya Chakrabarti. So त्यो खालके केस हुन्छ नि अब. I think people are more driven by the fact that what is shown to them, what is fed to them. अब जुन चाहिँ यो केस छ, अब यो सुशान्त सिंहको, अब रिपब्लिक टिभी गोस्वामीहरूले त टेकन इट एज अ होल केस हुन्छ नि, उनीहरूको अहिले दुकानै त्यसले चल्दैछ. अब त्यो खालके इट्स बिन पब्लिसाइज सो मच, इट्स बिन फेड टु आवर ब्रेन सो मच. अब त्यो म पनि अब यो एक हप्ता जस्तो कोठा बन्द गरेर रिपब्लिक टिभी एन्ड द वे द्याट इट इज फेब्रिकेटेड हुन्छ नि, हाम्रो दिमागमा हालिदिन्छ कि दिस इज समथिङ हि सुड गेट जस्टिस, चिनौँ या नचिनौँ त्यो मान्छेलाई. तर अब जब यु आर फेड विथ समथिङ सो कन्सटेन्टली, अफ कोर्स यु वुड वान्ट टु, your blood would boil for it, right? And the way women and the way Riya Chakrabarti has actually been made the culprit, and the way she has been, demonized, it's very disturbing. And Abu Man, the because this is not something that we are doing. This is something that's fed to us, and that is making us act on it. एन्ड मास प्रोटेस्ट टुवर्ड्स रेप कल्चर चाहिँ मलाई पनि त्यही लाग्छ. हुन्छ नि, जब आफ्नो मान्छे, जब कोही आफूले चिनेको, जब आफूले इन्टरेक्ट गरेको जब मान्छेलाई त्यस्तो हुन्छ, त अफकोर्स यो ब्लड वुड बोइल फर इट. बट until and unless it does not happen on your own level, it like you really wouldn't really question such an aspect. त्यो खालके पनि हुँदो रहेछ होइन. अन्तखेरि यो रेप कल्चर एन्ड मास, यो रेप कल्चरलाई क्वेसन चाहिँ किन नगरेको भने, जब अब निर्भया केसमा whole country was in rage, and there were and Priyanka Reddy ko case ma whole country was in rage, where a sorry, veterinary doctor, she was burnt after being raped, होइन. तर how many of us know कि त्यो सेम स्पटमा जहाँ चाहिँ Priyanka Reddy, she was burned alive, just I think around 2-3 kilometers away from there. Again, a woman was burnt. I don't know whether that was a suicide case, or even it's not been found whether it's a suicide case or whether it was someone had burnt her alive. त्यो थाहा छैन. But people usually tend to feel more for, I'm speaking from a very layman's perspective, because this is about like the society as a whole. So people only entertain such aspects that receives a lot of question, that receives a lot of gaze. So I think those are the areas that are much given focus to. So त्यो खालके इस्युजहरूले मात्रै हुँदो रहेछ. त्यो चाहिँ एकदमै अब विस्वादको कुरा पनि हो. एन्ड it's really actually the way, I don't know, I wouldn't really want to end with it, but the way Riya Chakrabarti is being trolled, and the way I don't know, I literally made an effort to read the entire Instagram post that she was given threat of rape, and she was given threat of like bad words were used, her life was threatened, her family is at stake, and त्यो सब कुराहरूलाई, I don't know, nobody would protest for her, nobody would be in support, except few of us who would want to like who would actually want to voice our opinions for it. But the हेर्नुहोस्, the media ले जहाँपट्टि नाच्दैछ, media, majority of the media is, I would say, अब अलिकति tilted towards demonizing her. So wherever it takes people, they just feed in that and they act upon it. And I think it's high time we really need genuine journalism houses, and I guess there are a few, but people also need to show equal support to it. I think that's it. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Publiknama and Rajada for his support, and I would also like to thank everybody who, encouraged and shared about my talk. And thank you very much. And I was very sorry. I must have been nervous throughout, because this was my first live video, and it's very weird to stare at the laptop alone. So thank you for being so patient with me, and I hope that we keep on questioning violence against women, which is something that happens on a daily basis, but we've just stopped questioning and giving it attention. So that is something I wanted to bring forth. today. Thank you so much.